when the documents will be posted?
Soonish.
Soonish.
Council just got them and they wanted to give council a little bit of a head start.
Can you just explain on those documents, sir, why couldn't they have been made public sooner anyway?
Just because we were in the middle of a negotiation and I and council were not that interested in things that may not actually be issues, to be out in the public and have people talk about them before they were actually resolved.
So there is resolution, and council has to deal with those 4 things that you spoke about before.
That's right. Administration is recommending 3 of the 4 items, and the 4th item is for council's consideration.
For people who don't read arena agreements,
Who are those people?
there are a few Calgarians out there that don't. When you spoke of the Flames having the responsibility for cost overruns, whatever has been discussed, agreed upon now since April, does that deal with what will actually be in the building, or do the Flames control that? Like, so when you talk about luxury boxes, does the city still have a say in terms of what's in this thing?
So basically, the development permit, which is what controls a lot but not all of the features of the building, is a city regulatory requirement. We have to approve the development permit, and that development permit must be approved in the next 4 or 5 months in order for the timelines on, well, I should say it must be considered, because I don't have the right to approve it, but it must be considered in the next 4 to 5 months for the organization to meet its timelines on when the arena needs to be done. So given that, there's going to be a lot of conversation between now and the end of this year around the final elements of the design that will include things like that. Not everything, because some of the things are not development permit issues. But, things like the number of bathrooms and so on will be part of the development permit process.
So there will be satisfaction from council's perspective about what it is we're getting for our money.
Yeah, I think so. And I really want to highlight something, which is that while I may not enjoy the facade of Rogers Place in Edmonton, for example, it's extremely uncommon, if not unheard of, for these sorts of facilities not to be nice, right? The owners of these teams want them to be nice. They're competing with one another on who has the nicest one. And so I have a lot of faith that the process will work out in that way.
But Calgary is looking for a building that's much more permeable, exterior-wise, than Rogers.
This is an interesting question, because now I'm going to pontificate for a minute. My favorite arena design of arenas that I've been to is the one in Washington, D.C. And the thing about that arena is you never know what was there. You're walking down the street and you see a McDonald's and a bar and a restaurant, and in between those retail outlets, there's an entrance to an arena. So if you kind of looked way up, you'd see an arena there. I love that. I'm not a big fan of the kind of architecture that just says, here I am, look at me. And for the cultural and entertainment district to work, you need people to experience this building at the street level. And I know that the building across the street, the BMO Center expansion, which is exceptionally beautiful, has also spent a lot of time helping figure out how people will engage with it at the street level.
When will we get a look at the design?
We'll get some renderings when we, not this afternoon, but in the presentation, when it's made to council.
Okay.
They're preliminary, but I insisted that people at least get to see some pictures, so.
Earlier we heard about potentially a $60 million cost overrun.
It was 70 million.
I believe it was Mr. Duckworth at 60.
Did he? Okay. At one point it was 70.
I know there's the $25 million, and that's really the only part that the city really cares about. That's part of what is
Correct.
But is that still your understanding of how much the overrun is? Or
No, I know that everybody's been working to try and look at what the nice to haves are here and try and bring the cost down. So I fully anticipate it will end up in the end somewhere between the 575. It'll end up somewhere between the 575 and the 610 or 620 that we've heard. But those numbers are not yet finalized. But what council has already agreed to is that the city's cost commitment, cash cost commitment to the building itself will be capped at 287.5.
plus
plus demolishing the saddle dome, plus some site works and some transportation infrastructure that we'd be doing anyway for the neighborhood.
So will we get those numbers by the end of this meeting?
Probably not, because those are still being worked on, and council's decision is to cap council's or the city's contributions. But beyond that, as the development permit is being worked on, as the project is being tendered, those numbers may shift.
So I guess maybe some clarification. The agreements that are being discussed today, those details, when exactly were those exactly agreed upon, and besides these four other things?
Like minutes ago? Well, council made a decision, and this was confidential, and now I can talk about it. The council made two important decisions the last time we discussed this. The first was to trigger the clause that allows us to put in some money for cost overruns, $12.5 million. And the second was to reconsider our decision on the development manager. So those decisions were made at the last meeting of council.
So is it fair to call this a new deal or revised deal?
No, just revised. I would say revised.
Has the source of money been identified?
Of the 12.5?
Yeah, where the city will find it.
You know, yes, we did it the last time, and I don't remember.
Okay. But fair to say this again, like the rest of it, will not have an impact on property taxes?
That's right. It was finding money we had in various drawers. I mean, obviously there's an opportunity cost. Obviously there's other things we could be spending the money on. But ultimately we've done so in a way that is not directly related to our operating budget or people's taxes.
So, and can you talk about the city's return then? There's been no mention of adjustments to the facility fee. So does this lengthen the payback to the city, or what's the impact?
There will be an adjustment to the facility fee. I'll leave you on tenterhooks for that one until you see the report. But ultimately, it will not result in more money back to the city. However, we still believe that this additional $12.5 million, which is, under 5% of what the city had said we would pay, ultimately that will wash out when we get the facility fees back over 35 years.
Can I ask you about Richmond Green, if that's all right?
Yes.
It seems to be one of the bigger items on the public hearings. I spoke to a couple of residents. There seems to be a lot of opposition amongst these certain residents regarding this 5-acre plot of land there. They said they're saying it sets a precedent for the removal of some park space for density. They're saying they're fine with density, but not sacrificing.
Well, at the end of the day, remember that selling off this corner of the lot results in a bigger park in the end, because that money is used to rehabilitate the rest of the park and open it for public space. So that precedent's been set. Last week I had the opportunity to open Low Savo Commons. It's exactly the same story. There used to be a not very nice mid-block park there, and the city engaged in a land swap with the developer so that they could build a tall building mid-block, and we would take the land on the end to make a nicer park than what was there before. So this is not an uncommon thing. Certainly if it was leading to a net loss of green space, I'd be pretty upset. But, and I'll listen very carefully to the public hearing. I don't know how I'm going to vote yet. But I would argue that this is something the city often does in order to improve parks and increase the amount of green space, because this is how you fund it.
And so, what will ultimately happen with that golf course? They mentioned there'll be some fencing and stuff like that. Does that money go to that rehabilitation around those corners?
Yeah, so there's basically, if I can oversimplify, there's 3 bits of land on this big piece. There's a golf course, there's an existing regional park which has some ball diamonds and things in it, and then there's a city works yard which covers kind of the whole southern piece. So the idea is that if the city is able to sell off this little corner of it, then that money will go to rehabilitate the works yard and the golf course to make a larger park.
Has there been a sort of left-right shift in terms of this issue from when it first started? Because you recall when the discussion of the closing of the golf course came about, it was like, well, let's see how much of the land we can sell and make some tax revenue off of this. And now you have, for example, the MP for Calgary Centre and Weekend saying the park shouldn't be built on there forever.
Yeah, it is a bit odd, isn't it? I don't believe really in a left-right split on council. I think we very rarely see that. But it is a bit odd that the folks who are all over stop subsidizing golf, sell the land, create it are similarly now the folks who are saying, no, never do that. And I might suggest that if I were a member of parliament and I wanted to engage on local issues, I might actually pick up the phone and get some answers before I did that. All right, thanks everybody.